Our first story behind mansion walls.
A rifle comes out of the window, shots are fired.
A wealthy wife in the crosshairs.
I died at the scene of the crime.
But who is pulling the trigger?
It was Millionaire versus Millionaire.
And later,
she just has that sort of je ne sais quoi. Hi. You want to look like her, you want to be like her.
a Dallas beauty meets an ugly end.
Mommy.
This crime had it all. Greed, family dysfunction, jealousy.
I'm Christopher Mason. Being rich often means never having to sully your hands with dirty tasks. You can expect the hired help to clean your mansion, walk your dog, or manicure the grounds. And to purchase a little dose of murder, all it takes is the right amount of blood money.
Heather Grossman has lived a fantasy behind mansion walls, buying the best things in life.
We did many lavish things that I had never done before. We would fly in the Lear jets to the Bahamas, to Jamaica. Everything was first class with him. If you went to a Broadway show, he would buy the best tickets. The hotels we stayed in were always first class.
Then one day, her fantasy life violently ended.
I felt the bullet penetrate into my neck, and I felt like my body was shutting down, and I tried to scream for help, and help wouldn't come out.
In the late 1980s, Heather is a stunning young flight attendant with one customer in first class.
He was very charismatic, handsome, well-dressed, very polite.
Her passenger is multimillionaire car dealer Ron Samuels. And Ron is smitten.
She was a former cheerleader, and he was 18 years her senior.
On their next first-class flight, they sit side by side.
You know, he would say, well, I feel like going to Paris. He says, let's just buy our tickets.
Thank you.
Ron Samuels' whole life is first class.
Go try my new dress.
You know, he made a lot of money, and he spent a lot of money. He enjoyed life.
After they marry in 1988, Heather and Ron enjoy a special gift you can't put a price on.
My son, Ronnie, was the first one born. And then 2 years later, I had twins.
But Ron Samuels has trouble making the switch from champagne and caviar to diapers and bottles.
And here he is, a grown man, and I have this beautiful new child, and he wasn't appreciating it. I was always trying to explain that, you know, our life is changing. We can't just take off to Paris now. We can't go to the Bahamas.
In 1992, their high-flying marriage is grounded. Heather files for divorce. Ron Samuels doesn't miss a beat, finding a new wife in the office of his divorce lawyer.
She was a secretary in his law firm's office, and he plied her with gifts, a Rolex watch, a 5-carat diamond ring.
My lawyer said to me, Heather, I have something to tell you. He said, well, Ron has gotten another woman pregnant, and she's pregnant with with twins.
The Florida businessman also sells off his lucrative Pensacola car dealership for a reputed $30 million.
After the divorce, he sold his dealerships and he put the money in the Grand Cayman Islands.
The one reason he sent it offshore was to protect his assets from creditors, and that included Heather Grossman.
The glamorous blonde is once bitten by a millionaire husband, but not twice shy. Heather's new man is entertainment mogul John Grossman.
Heather remarried John Grossman, whose father, Bud Grossman, was a co-owner, a millionaire co-owner of the Minnesota Vikings.
You know, I'm a very lucky man.
In the summer of 1997, the newlyweds settle into one of Florida's most elite enclaves.
The upper tier of wealth gravitates to Boca Raton. It's almost become a punchline for well-heeled snobbery, Boca Raton.
I really felt like this was my second chance at love. And I was so happy.
One of the horrors in going through life is to have something unexpected happen, something that you didn't see coming, something that's so devastating that it causes complete alteration of one's life. This is what happened to Heather on October 14th in 1997.
That October morning begins as just another sun-drenched day in paradise for Heather and John.
Heather and John Grossman were going out for lunch, as they often do.
They pull up at a stoplight.
The car pulls up. The passenger window is lowered slightly. A rifle barrel comes out.
Leaned forward to get my briefcase because I needed something. And when my head came up,
The first shot basically blows a hole in Heather's neck, a gaping hole.
I felt the bullet penetrate into my neck. And then I fell over onto my husband's lap. I don't remember anything after that.
A second shot hits Heather's husband.
John got shot in the chin. He was grazed, so he was perfectly fine.
Heather Grossman is not so fine.
She dies. She was initially declared dead.
Breathe.
I died at the scene of the crime.
A paramedic happens to be nearby.
What happened?
And he brings Heather back to life. But Heather won't be returning to the life she knew. The life of swimming and exercising, of playing with her young family. That life is over. The bullet has severed Heather's spinal cord. In the ER, Heather lies on the cusp of life and death. And her surgeon offers her a choice.
He told her, if you want to live, squeeze my hand once. If you want to let go, squeeze twice. Because that's the only form of communication that this surgeon had with Heather Grossman. She squeezed once, and they immediately went into surgery, and they were able to save her life.
Heather undergoes all kinds of intensive care. She's in critical condition. The upshot is she can't move from the neck down.
Heather is left a quadriplegic. Today, she can only breathe with a ventilator and will need 24-hour care for the rest of her life.
The doctor told me that I would not be able to move my arms or my legs. And it just started bawling and crying because I couldn't believe that this had happened to me.
No one can believe what has happened to Heather. And police want to know why it's happened.
They don't know when they come up on a horrific crime like this what the motivation is.
Multimillionaires just don't get gunned down on the wealthy streets of Boca Raton. Has John Grossman crossed a business rival?
Was it something professional? Did he anger someone in his line of work?
The police routinely question Heather's first husband, Ron Samuels, but he has an alibi. And Ron throws the blame back on Heather's new husband, John Grossman. He claims John was abusing his children and set up the whole ambush.
Why would John have somebody shoot him, then shoot me too? It made no sense.
Detectives have one big advantage in this case. The assassins were stupid.
One would think you wouldn't choose a busy intersection in the middle of the day where witnesses can take your license tag, which is exactly what happened.
The tip takes police straight to the shady underbelly of the Sunshine State.
A low-grade street hustler, pimp, crack dealer.
How did this glamorous rich couple get tangled up with a deadbeat drug addict?
It just didn't make sense.
In the seaside paradise of Boca Raton, a millionaire couple has been gunned down in broad daylight. The wealthy locals aren't accustomed to dodging bullets on these boulevards, so cops are eager for a break before they lose any more of Florida's finest.
Barely an inch separated John Grossman from death. The assassin's bullet grazed his chin. His wife Heather had a closer call and is left a quadriplegic. The lunchtime drive-by has plenty of eyewitnesses, and police trace the shooter's car within hours. Its owner is Hugh Estes.
John and I had never heard of the name Hugh Estes.
Estes is a local insurance agent. He says he gave the car to someone else that day.
He claimed that he turned the car over to Eddie Slim Stafford, a low-level street hustler, crack dealer, and pimp.
The police put the squeeze on Slim Stafford, and the crack addict starts talking. Yes, he was at the wheel that day. And he wasn't alone.
Roger Runyon, ex-Army marksman, also a crack addict, living on the streets, no job.
They were lowlifes. They were all on drugs. The shooter was ex-military, but on cocaine. So they were bad people.
Roger Runyon says he was paid to pull the trigger by Hugh Estes.
Mr. Estes was the one who hired the hitmen and the driver, and Mr. Estes was the one who provided the car for the crime.
And deep in Mr. Estes' past is a link to Heather Grossman. He has a buddy he sold insurance with back in the 70s. Heather's ex-husband, Ron Samuels. Is it just a strange coincidence? Ron's now happily remarried. Why would he want his ex-wife dead?
Ron was very volatile. He had a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde personality.
Ron didn't just struggle with his role as family man. He struggled to keep his foul temper in check.
People thought he was just great, just wonderful. But then there was that other side, when he would snap.
Heather says one time she was too slow answering the front door.
Why the hell don't you open the door? What is wrong with you?
I didn't hear it.
And then he comes out of the bedroom with a switchblade.
You didn't hear no dog?
No, I'm sorry.
Half an hour later, he's coming to me, trying to hug me and tell me he's so sorry, and trying to buy me gifts.
But no amount of gifts can save their abusive marriage.
I had everything I could possibly want. I was wealthy, I had a beautiful home. But I was terrified of the life I was living.
I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me.
And when he found out one time that I wanted to leave him, he got a gun and he held it to my cheek. He said, "If you ever leave me, I will kill you."
Once the couple splits, Ron suddenly wants to see more of his kids. He fights for custody of the children and loses. And in October 1997, the month of the shooting, the multimillionaire was facing prison over his unpaid child support.
The judge said that Ron Samuels owed $3,000 a month to Heather in child support, and he was in arrears for $60,000.
Unfortunately, his professed love for the children did not extend to him sending money.
A custody battle doesn't mean he's a killer. But Ron Samuels has one problem. He likes to be seen.
Ron was very showy. Ron had to have the best of everything. You know, Rolex presidential watches, the best shoes, the nicest cars.
And in the days leading up to the shooting, Ron was talking big to the Florida underworld.
He was going around quite openly saying he wanted Heather whacked. He wanted her out of the way, which is not the kind of behavior you want to exhibit if you're planning a murder.
That news gets back to the investigators, and it's enough for an indictment. In May 1998, a grand jury indicts Ron Samuels for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. But as police prepare to make their move, Ron Samuels has already made his.
Somehow, Samuels got word that an indictment was pending.
And within a day or two, he was in Mexico. That was a wild card that was not considered.
Multimillionaire Ron Samuels is cooling his heels in Mexico after being indicted for the attempted murder of his ex-wife, Heather Grossman. Back in sunny Florida, Heather is watching the shadows.
She felt that he was going to try to come back or hire somebody to come back to finish the job.
He was quite mad at Heather for keeping the children from him and for marrying another rich guy.
It became apparent that he refused to let go. He refused to let Heather Grossman go.
At the time of the shooting, Ron Samuels was facing a huge child support bill.
He wanted to be free of the $3,000 a month child custody burden he had to pay. He also wanted revenge.
Samuels has a plan. He takes out $1 million life insurance policy on his former wife.
That's when he recruited Estes to find him a couple of people to do away with Heather Grossman.
Prosecutor Alan Johnson believes he has a strong case, but he needs Ron Samuels back in the country. Luckily, the former car dealer has been dealing in other substances.
Mr. Samuels got himself in a little bit of trouble in Mexico, apparently, trafficking in cocaine.
Samuels spends 6 long years in a Mexican prison after being caught with 13 pounds of cocaine.
And then it's finally 2005 before he's returned to Florida to face charges in Heather's shooting.
In October 2006, Ron Samuels goes on trial for first-degree attempted murder in Palm Beach County Court.
I had to wait 9 years to actually go to court and to go to trial for my shooting.
The prosecution decides to use a crook to catch a crook.
Sometimes when you prosecute a case, the only witnesses are the bad guys.
The state had to play their biggest chip. They gave them complete immunity.
Samuel's hired henchmen take the stand. Hugh Estes says his old work buddy offered him big money to whack Heather. He enlisted lowlifes Slim Stafford and Roger Runyon to carry out the foul deed. In return for their testimonies, the hitmen have their freedom.
The triggerman in this case walks free, but they needed his testimony to get the mastermind, Ron Samuels.
The prosecution says Ron Samuels was desperate to win custody of his 3 children.
Whether he loved Heather and couldn't let her go, whether he hated Heather and wanted her dead because he didn't want to pay her a dime, and he wanted the kids, in his mind, if she was dead and it wasn't linked to him, who gets custody of the children?
Even when the murder attempt fails, Samuels doesn't give up.
2 days after I had been shot, Ron Samuels filed for custody of my children, stating that it was too dangerous for them to be with me.
While Ron Samuels liked his revenge served cold, he couldn't help reheating it over and over.
They found a scrapbook that he had kept. It had pictures of me in it and pictures from the newspaper about the shooting and different articles about the shooting.
One way or another, he wanted to destroy his ex-wife.
There was no love there. There was control, there was anger, there was venom. That was what was left of his feelings toward Heather Grossman.
Ron was the one that, if he did not go to jail, would continue to possibly try to kill me, and I would never be safe.
The charming multimillionaire is unmasked as a merciless killer.
Even his attorney called him a man who had done loathsome things.
On the 31st of October 2006, 9 years after the shooting, Heather Grossman finally hears the jury's verdict. Guilty.
I was overjoyed when I heard the sentence. I finally felt like I was not going to be afraid anymore, and that I was going to be safe, and that my children were going to be safe.
The judge labels Samuels the puppet master.
She gave him the maximum consecutive sentence that she could.
The 58-year-old gets life in prison for first-degree attempted murder, plus 120 years for plotting murder. While Ron Samuels rots in prison, Heather Grossman is serving her own life sentence.
You know, what happened to her should never happen to anyone. What she made out of her life since then is remarkable.
Heather spends every day living with the suffering caused by domestic violence. And now, she dedicates her life to speaking out against it.
I try to save lives because you need to break the chain of domestic violence. I'm just out there to make a difference, and it makes me happy doing it. Today, I have a happy and fulfilled life, and I enjoy every moment.
Ron Samuels attempted to destroy what he couldn't have by getting others to do his dirty work. In the end, he discovered good help is hard to find. Paying blood money might distance you from the menial task of murder, but it will never absolve you of the crime.
In an upscale Dallas home, a life of luxury hangs in the balance.
She was naked, had been stripped, and tied down to the four posts of a bed.
And a 4-year-old is looking for his mommy.
That little boy, after he awoke from his nap, went in to try to wake his mother up and couldn't wake her up.
Mommy.
But today, mommy won't be able to come and play.
Mommy.
He found her there, gasping, nearly dead. It was a vision that would haunt that child for the rest of his life.
Dallas. That TV show? It was real. In the early 1980s, there are 13 billionaires in America. 5 of them live in Dallas. And sharing whiskey and champagne with the real J.R. Ewings of this city is a glamorous couple. Wealthy physician Peter Gallianis and his beautiful wife Roseanne.
In the world of Dallas in the 80s, they were on top of the world. They were very successful and the envy of people around them.
Like many doctors, Peter found love across the operating table.
He was working in a surgical ward, and there she was.
She was just one of those women that drew men to her.
And he thought she looked like an angel. He was instantly smitten.
The good doctor marries his angelic nurse. And their happy marriage becomes even happier when they join Dallas's growing list of millionaires, thanks to Peter's booming medical supplies business.
Now they had enough to really build a big, beautiful house in North Dallas to show off that wealth.
In early 1983, they decide to make their dream home a reality.
Here you go.
The couple employs local builder Larry Aylor and his wife Joy.
Stars to the east and the west.
So beautiful.
Talking about
He was a very dynamic man.
absolutely the east-west window.
He had a reputation as building very fine custom homes in the $300,000 to $400,000 range, which in 1982 was a pretty expensive, pretty fabulous house.
Larry did the construction work, and Joy did a lot of the interior design work.
A red feature wall, because red and blue is all the go.
Joy Aylor's wealthy family helped bankroll Larry's construction business.
Diamond encrusted.
Her parents were worth $10 to $20 million. So she had always grown up with whatever she wanted.
Because diamonds are a girl's business.
Joy is still getting what she wants. Larry's business hauls in millions. And as quickly as the Aylors make money, they spend it.
Larry and Joy had a very flashy lifestyle. They had a lake house, they had a ranch, they had a beautiful big house. She drove a Porsche, he drove a Jaguar.
34-year-old Joy is not just an interior designer. She's a style queen.
Joy was a big socialite. She loved to be at parties. She loved to see and be seen.
She looked like a very classy version of Dallas royalty. She just has that sort of je ne sais quoi that, you know, you envy. You want to look like her. You want to be like her.
Thank you.
Peter Gallianis' glamorous wife, Roseanne, is a good match for Joy. And both couples share a love of the good life. But in the world of the wealthy, life can change with the blink of an eye, the clink of a champagne glass, or the blast of a gun.
I'm sure she never saw what was coming at all.
Dallas in the 80s is going through its J.R. Ewing-style golden age. The city is flash and cashed up. Success is measured by the number of jets in your private fleet. But just as money here can purchase untold happiness, it can also buy misery and murder.
On a cool fall afternoon in October 1983, Roseanne Galeana starts to turn her mind to tonight's dinner.
Roseanne put her little 4-year-old into bed to sleep and went about just shutting down the house for the day.
Not long later, her son woke up from his nap, walked into his mother's bedroom looking for her.
There, the little boy is confronted by a nightmarish scene.
Mommy.
His own mother lies naked and bloodied, tied to her bed.
Mommy.
Roseanne has been strangled and shot twice in the head.
To see a human being that's in that condition, the initial reaction is shock.
The 4-year-old has been taught that if something is ever wrong, call Daddy.
And finally he said, "Dad, she won't wake up and she looks funny. There's something coming out of her mouth that's red."
The doctor immediately knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. And he rushed home to find this horrible, horrible scene.
Captain David Golden of the Richardson Police Department is one of the first to respond.
When I arrived on the scene, she was still alive and fighting for her life. They cut her loose and placed her on a gurney.
But 2 days later, the 33-year-old mother dies in the hospital.
What kind of crime that was to have a young woman that was full of life, murdered in her own house with her own 4-year-old son, finding her body there.
What kind of person would do such a thing?
In any crime where a woman is murdered, the first suspect is the man that's closest to her, and in this case, that would be Dr. Peter Galunas.
Cheers.
The police soon find out this seemingly healthy marriage was at death's door.
Everything in their future looked very bright, but behind closed doors, things were not as happy as they seemed.
Peter had gotten suspicious that Roseanne was having an affair.
Consumed by doubt, the doctor hires a private investigator.
And the private investigator came back to him and said, "You're right, she is having an affair." And then Peter was shocked when he told him who the affair was with. It was Larry Aylor, the builder.
Stung by the betrayal, Peter confronts Roseanne. And in May 1983, she leaves him for Larry Aylor. The police believe that is more than enough motive for murder.
They really looked at Peter because, of course, he had a motive. He was angry. She's having an affair with this man under his nose.
Her lover, Larry, also suspects Peter.
He pointed his finger at Peter, and he said Peter did it. He didn't want to have to split his assets with his wife, and they were about to get a divorce.
Then, Peter points the finger right back at Larry.
And so we were left with both of these subjects that were pointing at each other and saying that they're the ones you should really be looking at.
One way to sort the truth from the lies is a polygraph test.
They gave both Peter and Larry and Joy lie detector tests, and everyone passed with flying colors.
There was not any reason for us to believe that we could tie either of these people to this crime.
It's not the scorned husband. It's not the new lover. It's not the wife he betrayed. So all of Dallas is asking, who shot Roseanne Galeanos? Days after Roseanne's attack, a Dallas nurse is found bound and strangled to death in her own home. Is this all the work of a serial killer?
All of the indications were that this was a sexual crime perpetrated by some sexual predator who had identified Roseanne as a victim.
A grieving Peter Galeanos clutches at straws.
Peter put up a reward of $25,000 for anyone who could give evidence leading to the arrest and conviction of the person who murdered his wife.
But that elusive serial killer can't be found. The case goes ice cold for 5 long years. Then, in spring 1988, a woman contacts the Richardson Police Department, North Dallas, with a story to tell.
Carol Garland told the police that her husband had received $5,000 to arrange for the murder of Roseanne. He, in turn, gave $1,500 to George Hopper to commit the crime.
The police have trouble picturing petty thief George Hopper as a sadistic sex killer.
He was a small-time crook, didn't have much of a criminal background. He had gone to a Bible college at one point, but just kind of a ne'er-do-well.
The big question is, who's bankrolling this murder-for-hire scheme?
The detective, of course, is like, well, who hired your husband? And Carol said, my sister, Joy Aylor.
Joy Aylor, a delightful Dallas socialite, is paying for a hit?
No, there's no way. She passed a lie. Joy Aylor passed a lie detector test. Why would she have done such a thing? That doesn't make any sense.
It seems like a jealous Carol is trying to frame her high society sister and claim the reward money. Dallas detectives dismiss it as a petty family feud. So Carol Garland offers to prove it by luring Joy into a trap.
They asked her to wear a wire and meet Joy for lunch.
It all seems innocent enough until the socialite starts boasting to her big sister.
Joy admitted that she was behind Roseanne's murder.
No, there's been no trouble at all. I'm quite glad I did it.
And that Roseanne deserved it. She was glad it happened.
I paid him $5,000 to kill Roseanne.
Despite the unlikely story that Carol told the police, they followed it up and they discovered everything that Carol had said was actually true.
Now all they need to do is track down Joy's hitman, George Hopper.
It took the police 5 months to locate George Hopper and bring him in for questioning. And when they did, he confessed. He spilled it all.
He eventually just dropped his head and said, I did it.
George Hopper reveals the chilling truth of that fatal encounter back in 1983.
George Hopper appeared at the front door of Roseanne's home bearing flowers.
Hi there.
She probably thought that they were from Larry.
He appeared to be a flower delivery man, but that was just a ruse.
What is this?
Shut up!
And the man threw the flowers down and pushed himself into the house.
He's gonna hurt me. Please.
He ripped off all her clothes. He tied all 4 of her limbs to the corners of the bed. Then he started choking on her.
Joy specifically told Bill Garland when she handed him the address and the photograph of Roseanne and the money, I want this to look like a sex crime. Set it up like a sex crime.
But as Hopper chokes her, Roseanne starts to break free.
He became scared that she was about to get away from him. He took a pistol
and shot her twice in the head through a pillow. I think he didn't want to look at her face.
And the well-manicured hand behind his every violent move is Joy Aylor. A woman born into Dallas royalty is now the queen of blood money. In May 1988, she is arrested for the murder of Roseanne Galeanos.
She was dumbfounded. She was, furious. Her own sister had sold her out.
The silk-stocking suspect has the best legal counsel money can buy, and she quickly makes bail.
After her arrest, Joy was released on a $150,000 bond, which is actually a fairly low bond for a capital murder charge.
And that turns out to be a mistake.
She got all of her cash out of the bank, and she ran off.
The police couldn't find her, the marshals couldn't find her. It's like she just disappeared into thin air.
Dallas socialite Joy Aylor lived her life surrounded by money. She learned when times are good, money will buy you diamonds, pearls, and champagne. And when things aren't going your way, it will buy you the blood of your enemies. Like the woman who's sleeping with your husband. In May 1990, Joy Aylor should be on trial for murder. Instead, she's on the run.
The eve of her trial date, with $500,000 in her pocket, she ran off.
And a picture of Joy is emerging that's very different from the one that graced the Dallas social pages.
Joy was a greedy, avaricious woman. She always felt that what she wants, she should have.
I think a lot of Joy's problems came from being the favorite child in a wealthy family, where she was doted upon, she was given everything she ever asked for.
When Roseanne Galeanos slept with Joy's husband, Larry, her days were instantly numbered.
She chose to do this simply because she was jealous and she wanted revenge.
The wealth had totally distorted her value system. What is a human life worth?
To Joy, it's about $5,000.
And make it look like a sex crime.
Joy Aylor had it all planned out. She wanted the hit to look like a serial killing. Bill Garland keeps a big cut of the money for himself and pays George Hopper less than half to do his dirty work.
Essentially killing this woman and making it look like a sex crime, as he'd been ordered to do, for $1,500.
When some criminals go on the run, they end up in a shack in South America. Joy Aylor liked to hide from the law in style.
She was living in a villa on the French Riviera, living it up and enjoying her days tremendously.
In March 1991, the murder of Roseanne Galeanos is a distant memory.
She didn't seem at all shy about hiding her wealth. She rather flaunted it, renting high-cost properties and making friends with all the important people.
The locals know her as Liz Sharp. Then, Joy has a minor fender bender in a rental car. And a credit card check finally uncovers the socialite's secret.
They found out she wasn't who she said she was, and there was an international warrant for her arrest.
From French Villa to French prison cell is a long way to fall. Too far for Joy Aylor.
When Joy was first arrested and interrogated, the moment she was left alone, she got a one-edged razor blade out of the waistband of her pants and slit both of her wrists.
She knows she faces the death penalty back in Texas. But the French have strong views on capital punishment.
We could not pursue a death penalty case against her because the French would not allow us to extradite her out of France and try her on a death penalty case.
Dallas authorities agree to drop the death sentence, and Joy Aylor is flown back to Dallas to face trial for murder. 11 years after Roseanne Galeanos was killed. On August 18, 1994, the verdict comes down. Guilty.
Joy Aylor was convicted of the murder of Roseanne Galeanos, and she received a sentence of life imprisonment.
A life sentence meant 30 years, but an eligibility for parole in 15.
The middleman, Bill Garland, pleads guilty to arranging the murder and is also sentenced to 30 years. George Hopper, the man happy to end a life for a cut of just $1,500, isn't so lucky. He's found guilty of capital murder and given the death penalty.
He was executed by lethal injection.
Hopper is racked with remorse.
He asked for forgiveness, but he said, I know I don't deserve any forgiveness. But he did show remorse.
Despite the horrible way that Roseanne died, despite the fact that Joy knew she was responsible for her death, Joy never showed any remorse. It was as if Roseanne never existed.
When you have the cash to buy anything, even death can be purchased without any real thought of the cost or consequence. Obsessed by what he couldn't have, Ron Samuels bankrolled the destruction of 2 lives, while Joy Aylor tried to buy back her husband's love by paying for murder. Handing over blood money turned out to be a down payment on a tiny room with no view. Till next we meet behind mansion walls, I'm Christopher Mason.